All right, welcome to episode 3 of History and Music Podcast. This is your host Scott Gifford, and I'm here with Sean Oborn. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me back.
Oh yeah,
Two-time special guest.
yeah, dude, you are.
I'm becoming a fixture.
Yes, that's the word. You're a fixture. That had a ton of fun last episode. Thanks to everyone that listened and is listening now. It's really cool to have heard the response that we got from last episode, and we're just getting started. So don't worry. Don't know about a schedule or anything, but we're feeling really energized and really good about going forward. I don't know about you, Sean, but I do.
We got more content on the horizon, man.
Oh yeah, we got a whole list. We got people knocking on the door wanting to share their songs. So I mean, if you're listening to this and think, "Oh, I have a song. I know this song has cool historical context." If you have one, hit us up. Like we're totally. We want more people. Like you can come on the podcast and talk about it with us. However you can think to communicate with us. If you know us, just hit us up. But if you don't, we're on Twitter, both pretty active on Twitter. My at is .gif. Sean, what's yours?
Mine is at #HeyBro with underscores in between each word.
And hashtag is spelled out. Obviously.
It's one. Yeah, it's spelled out one word.
All right, we'll put it in the show notes. So look in the show notes. We don't have one yet, but we'll probably put like an email in there or something. We'll set up a Gmail so you can send it in.
Yeah, don't want you blowing up our personal email.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but as Scott was saying, if you have a song that you think would be a good, one to feature on this, a song that's not necessarily just an old song, but one that discusses some aspect or person, thing in history that you enjoy or you know about or something, let us know. And we'd be happy to do some, minimal research and talk about it, or better yet, have you come on as a guest and talk about it. But if that's not your thing, or you're a little too, nervous and get some stage fright, that's okay too. But we're definitely easy either way.
Yeah, we might try and bully you to come on, but
we'll definitely do that.
Yeah. So I'm going to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this, but what have you been listening to lately, Sean?
So lately, I've been listening to those fans of the show will remember that you and I met on sort of just through Twitter mutuals, but one of them was through a music group chat that we're in, hosted by our good friend Bob Duck. And so mostly I've been listening to now is the stuff that we're posting in that group chat.
Yeah.
And for those that don't know, the way it works is each day there's probably about 10 or 12 of us in the group, I think. Mm-hmm. And each day one of us will post just one song and of any song of our choosing, and everyone in the group has to listen to it that day and give it a thumbs up that you listen to it. And then afterwards, we kind of discuss it in the chat as far as what we liked or the layering or, whatever else about that song. So mostly what I've been listening to is the laundry list of songs we've been getting from that. Mm-hmm. And it's actually, I think it's my turn to post on Sunday. So I've got to think of a good churchy one to put on there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's always like a struggle when it comes on Sunday. Cause like, do I go punk or do I go like something a little more spiritual?
Yeah, well, not only that, but some of the dudes we got in there are like straight up just music heads, and so they're like going real deep on some of these songs and analyzing them. And here I am posting like New Found Glory. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel it. I feel you, man. Yeah, the last one you posted, I had that was an interesting. It was like Swedish or something, right?
Oh, she's German. Yeah, Nina.
German.
Yeah, it's sort of like a sort of an 80s. What do they call that? Wave.
Uh-huh.
Song.
Oh yeah, totally.
That one was kind of a crowd pleaser, so I'm good. I think I've redeemed myself with the group with that song.
Yeah, my last one was kind of a crowd pleaser, but this one I didn't get much of a reaction.
I'm surprised Bob let me in. My submission song was a Fall Out Boy song, but whatever. Here I am.
That's funny. All right, well, cool. Yeah, that's kind of where I get a lot of my music recently too. I've actually also started kind of a little bit of a chat with my with the Cold Bow guys. Shout out to the Cold Bow podcast. Where it's kind of the postings gotten kind of stale there, but you can still go listen to our backlog. They're all pretty evergreen topics. So yeah, we're talking about music in there. I actually steal some stuff from those guys to post into Bob Duck's chat. So Yeah, Reese, I actually stole your most recent song, the Fote thing. But so, what's up, Reese? I forgot about you a couple episodes ago. Friend of the podcast. Anyway, cool. Yeah.
So what song was that we just heard?
Which that we just
the one in the intro of the
oh yeah
episode.
So today's song is by Dropkick Murphys, which is an awesome band. They're just a fun, energetic punk, like Irish folk type punk. Dropkick Murphys. This song is called "Fields of Athenry," which has historical context and it's pretty cool. It's kind of a sad song. Sean, you actually suggested it. What's your history with this song?
I realized that in retrospect, that because you were the one that said we should do that for episode 3. We should do this song. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one, man. And then I went back and realized that I was the one that actually suggested it. Just forgot. So Fields of Athenry. I was never a huge like Dropkick Murphys fan in high school. I liked a handful of their songs. But there's some dudes out there that's all they listen to is like Celtic punk, and more power to you. But I liked a little bit more variety. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I loved this song specifically. It's probably my favorite Dropkick Murphys song ever. So I listened to the heck out of this one when it first came out, especially. And I was checking before the show. This song came out in 2003, and that's basically when I graduated high school. So this was basically like the soundtrack to my 03, I would say. Mm-hmm. This and probably some Flogging Molly, but we can talk about Flogging Molly later.
Oh yeah, well, they're coming up. We might not do it next episode because we don't want two of the similar bands. But
too much Celtic punk in the same same vein. But yeah, so that's sort of my history with it. Is I love this song in high school, and then after we kind of decided to do it for this show, I kind of started to look into, I guess, the historical context of the song, which led us to our show today. But that's basically it. I mean, I'm like I said, I was not a huge Dropkick Murphys fan. We were talking before the show. I've seen them live once, and you can't even really call it seeing them live because it was at Warped Tour in 2002 in Sacramento, mm-hmm. and it was more like me walking through Warped Tour. And for those that have been, there's like 6 stages, sometimes playing at the same time, like different bands playing on different stages at the same time. And so I was walking through Warped Tour. It was my first Warped Tour in 2002. And I saw Dropkick Murphys playing on one stage, but we were heading to see Rufio, a different band on a different stage. Uh-huh. And so I did catch like 1 or 2 songs from their set. And what I remember being the most impressed with were, dude, these guys have some seriously dedicated fans. Like, oh yeah, I feel like every dude in the crowd was wearing a kilt and had like these massive Irish Dropkick Murphys flags they were waving, and it was mm-hmm. like these guys. I feel like I'm at like a revolution for something. I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of that like European football fan, soccer fan type of vibe where they just really get up for things.
Yeah, it's kind of soccer hooligan vibes for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I actually saw them in 2010 at Warped Tour as well. And that's the only time I've seen them. I think they were like between Anti-Flag and Andrew WK or something, but they were on the main stage, and so it was a pretty legit like set they did that we watched. It was awesome. They're just like so full of energy. Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah. Before we get into like the actual history within the lyrics, that you had some insights on the context of the song itself, right?
Yeah. So I didn't know this, but the song, because when you listen to it, and everyone knows that Fields of Athenry is a cover song. So the Dropkick Murphys did not write this. I don't even think they mess with the lyrics at all. So I think the lyrics are verbatim, the original lyrics. But the original song was written in 1979. It's not mm-hmm. that old at all. In fact, it's roughly the same era as our last episode song, Rollin' the Headless Thompson Gunner, same era, late 70s.
Yeah, so, it's got very similar vibes.
Yeah,
it's kind of, not necessarily like the historical context, but we'll get into it.
Yeah, so so I looked up at the guy that wrote this in '79. The guy's name is Peter Mooney. He's an Irish mm-hmm. guy. He's from Dublin, but he goes by Pete St. John, and he's sort of like this Irish folk singer. He's written a bunch of songs. This Fields of Athenry is far and away, Irish movie reference, his best song ever. or not, I shouldn't say his best song, his most well-known song. I think it's his best song as well, but it's also the song that this is what he's known for, is this song.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I can understand it, I don't think he ever actually sang it. I think he just wrote the music and the lyrics for it, and other people have just picked it up and kind of put their own little sort of spin on it.
So basically, any version of it is a cover to an extent.
As I understand, yeah, because I tried looking for like versions of the song sung by the guy that wrote it, and they don't exist. The first time, because it was written in 1979, the first time it was ever recorded that I could find was in 1982. Mm-hmm. So 3 years after it came out, there was a guy named Paddy Reilly, another Irish singer who's actually still alive. He's in like his 80s, but he sang a version of it. It's kind of like a slow, very Irish kind of acoustic ballad. So, and there's other people that have recorded it around the same time, but I think the Paddy Reilly version in 82 is like that. That's what put Pete St. John on the map. That's what put Paddy Reilly on the map. I think that's what put this song on the map, is that one. Because according to our sources here, it was on the Irish charts for 72 weeks when it came out. That's a long time.
Dang.
Yeah. So it did some numbers.
That's awesome. And so, to kind of get a little bit into the history here, it's about the Great Famine in the 1840s.
I apologize. It actually was recorded in 1979 first by some guy named Danny Doyle. So it was recorded by a different singer, and then Paddy Reilly picked it up 3 years later, and that's what really took off. But yeah, my bad.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I didn't want to get some angry email like, actually, the first guy that did this was Danny Doyle, idiot.
I'm loving all the names that sang it because they're all so freaking Irish. It's funny.
Yeah. Can you make it sound more Irish?
So the song is about a pretty depressing and horrible event happened in the 1840s, the mid to late 1840s, the Great Famine or the Great Hunger. And what's kind of interesting that I read is that there's very little Irish. There's a lot of Irish art out there, like lots of songs and poetry and novels and stuff like that, but none that are necessarily explicitly about the Great Famine. And some historians have said that in the following years, no one really wanted to talk about it, and so it didn't. There's not a whole lot of art. There's a lot of art that's influenced by it. It's very lots of Irish art is depressing and stuff, and I think this is a big reason why. But not a lot that is explicitly about the event. And so I think it's kind of cool that this song, even though it's late, better than never, something to commemorate something that happened and should be remembered.
Yeah. And for those keeping track at home, I guess I didn't know this, but the Irish call it the Great Famine, the Famine, or the Great Hunger. Mm-hmm. In like outside Ireland or based in the United States, we call it the potato famine. So it's the potato famine that they're talking about. They just call it the famine. Everyone else calls it the potato famine. Yeah. So it's I guess 1845, I think, is when it started, and it lasted for about 4 or 5 years. Yep. But they estimate that during this time, the Irish lost 1 million people from basically starvation, some sickness as well. But in addition to that, there was over 2 million Irish that basically emigrated to different places across the world. I think mostly the U.S. and Canada, and so
and Australia.
And Australia, yeah. And so it kind of changed the demographics of Ireland because of that. And I was talking to Scott before the show. I believe this is one of the main reasons why we have so many Irish in places like Boston and New York, is because of this.
Totally.
They left Ireland literally starving. They moved to the slums of Boston and New York, and that's how we kind of have that sort of stereotypical, Irish guy and the inner city New York. You have Irish neighborhoods and that kind of thing.
And speaking to that stereotype, it was the poor and destitute that had to leave, and so those are the ones that were showing up on the shores or into America, and so they came in as mostly Catholic, Irish Catholic, and so there was, while America was mostly Protestant, so there was a lot of conflict between the new Irish population coming in, and so that's one of the effects, I guess, of this famine. But to get to kind of the beginning I didn't realize that it had the. So it was caused by a blight on the potatoes, right? And that started it started in Mexico.
Yeah,
Um,
see, I didn't know that. I actually had to look
I
up
did,
what a blight even was. I've heard the
yeah,
word before, but
hmm
I guess it's a fungus or
yeah,
like a mold.
exactly. There is a scientific name for this particular one. I didn't write it down, so but it doesn't matter. But yeah, they assume that it came across on Irish or on American ships to Europe, and it affected all of Europe. So all of Europe had this potato blight, but it mostly affected Ireland because they were so dependent on the one crop, and it wasn't just potatoes in general. It was one species of potato that they were 100% dependent on. At least
Well, and that's all they grew. That was
yeah,
the one thing they grew, the one thing they knew how to grow to know how to grow. Excuse me,
yeah.
for the most part. And so
Well,
that's why it was so
that was
devastating.
that was for like the peasant class. That's what they
Yeah,
ate, and that's all they had. Like 90% of their diet, basically. They did grow other crops, but it wasn't for the Irish. It was for the British farmers that owned the land. And so that's another interesting part is Britain's role in the whole thing, because they were under Britain rule at the time. There were, for the most part, the farms and stuff were owned by British businessmen and farmers and stuff, and the people that the Irishmen that were actually farming were renting or were working for the British
yeah. It
people.
was
And
almost
so
like sharecroppers or something. I
yeah,
was
something
reading
like that.
about this, and I mean, there's whole history classes dedicated to this kind of thing, like
Hmm.
the history of economy, the history of labor, and labor
Oh yeah,
changed over time. So not my flavor of history, but some dudes are into it.
yeah.
But one thing that was interesting, and I guess I had known this, but sometimes like the scale of just I guess just British control of certain parts of the world is kind of astounding.
It is.
So like Great Britain had ruled Ireland more or less since about the 1100s, maybe a little before that, and they always had a monarch, king or queen. Obviously, they still have one today, but the number two person in power in Ireland was someone they called the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. So
Hmm.
basically, the king or queen would appoint this like a governor of the island, basically of Ireland, and they were called the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. And from basically the 1100s until 1922, there was a Lord Lieutenant of Ireland appointed by the British Crown, and that guy was basically he was supposed to live in Dublin Castle in Dublin, but he was supposed to be sort of like the president of Ireland until Irish independence. And I mean, it's pretty amazing. I mean, that's like was it 800 years?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's
you
it's
know?
hard to fat like we don't think in that like I mean America's like a fraction of that, right? And so we don't like it's hard to fathom that type of that length of time under a single rule, you know.
Yeah, we'll find stuff here. It's like, oh, look at this house. It was built in like 1890. That's super old.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
And so that,
I was on Google Maps and kind of punching around in Athenry, the town that it's an actual town in or village in Ireland, and I was like kind of walking around on Street View and like looking at old walls and like trying to think like I wonder how old that like stone wall is because I mean it could be 1,000 years old or more, you know.
yeah. Well, when I was reading about it too, because it's a small little town in County Galway, and it's like apparently one of the things it's known for is the street plan, like the layout of the roads in the town
Hmm.
dates back to the 13th century, like the Anglo-Normans like laying out. So even like their roads are from the 1200s, which
Yeah.
is wild.
Yeah, yeah. There's
you
like
know?
there's a castle in the middle of town and like a little archway that's like maybe 10 feet wide that little cars can go under. Like that's a modern road now, but I'm sure it was just like horse and buggy going under it when it was built.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
crazy.
it's crazy. And what's interesting is no one, apparently, from what I understand, no one heard or cared about Athenry until this song came out. Then all of a sudden, people are, now it's put on the map, like I said earlier. And I guess the mayor of Athenry or the city councilman, whoever is in charge of the town, invited Pete St. John, the guy that wrote this song, after the song kind of gained some traction. They invited him over and like gave him a key to the city or something like that.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, for I guess just adding to the income, I guess, from just people traveling there.
Dude, that's funny. Well, yeah, if you think about like some small town here, they get a huge song like it with all this historical context, and yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah, but why don't we should we dive into the lyrics here a little bit?
Let's do it. Yeah, okay. we can pull some history out of these lyrics for sure.
Yeah, because most of them is, I mean, the chorus is repeated over and over again, and a lot of it is just sad Irish being sad Irish, and so we don't really need to delve into those. But one thing I kind of wanted to do is just sort of pick out the stuff that is a reference to something specific, because the song is not real. It's not based on a real person. It's not based on a real story that the writer like heard about or anything. Supposedly he heard a story about a guy that stole something and was placed on a prison ship to Australia. That's kind of like the genesis of the song. But
there's actually some historical precedent for that. I'll get into later.
Yeah, there definitely is. But as far as like Pete St. John, the writer for this song, he doesn't have, as far as I know, he doesn't have a personal connection to it. I don't think he was descended from people that were on, prison ships or anything like that. I think it's just more of, he just wanted to write a really Irish song about hate in England. Yeah. But anyway, so
but real quick, that's if you listen to our last episode about Roland the Headless Thompson Gunner, it's a little bit in that same vein where it's a historical context with like a fictional story to I guess make it land.
Right. And so the song is told from, it starts off as the point of view of someone who is overhearing a conversation between a man and a woman. You later find out are husband and wife. And the woman is on the outside of this wall, a prison wall, and the husband is in prison. And as we go along in the song, what you find out is she's a young girl. She's talking to her husband, this guy named Michael. And they've taken him away because he stole Trevelyan's corn so that their kids would survive the night, basically, so they have something to eat.
Right.
And so because of that, they're going to put him on a prison ship.
Right.
Now, go ahead.
No, you had something to say. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. So the one thing is the guy's name is for you stole Trevelyan's corn so the young might see the morn. And I thought maybe they just picked like a real British name, Trevelyan, or maybe it's like the Bond villain. Because I think in the James Bond, isn't Trevelyan? Isn't that the Sean Bean character from that Bond movie?
I don't even know.
Yeah, but so when I looked it up, I realized that this Trevelyan guy, he's a real dude.
Really?
And yeah, his name is. I looked it up. His name is Sir Charles Edward Trevelyan, 1st Baronet. He went full British on the name, and during the time that we're talking about, the Great Famine, the Irish potato famine, he was in the sort of, I guess, some higher up government position with the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland. So remember, the Lord Lieutenant of Ireland is sort of like the governor of Ireland appointed by the crown. Well, this guy, Sir Charles Trevelyan, was up there in that government during this time. And the reason why it's important that they say that he stole Trevelyan's corn is because the Irish didn't grow corn. They grew potatoes, right? Which is why they're in the situation they're in. But Trevelyan, this guy, this British guy that was sort of over the Irish during the potato famine, hated the Irish, like most Brits then and now. Yeah,
exactly.
Hated the Irish. And he actually believed that the potato famine was God's judgment being passed on the Irish, and he actually wrote that to an Irish friend during the potato famine. The guy had no chill.
It was like, I don't know if racism is the right word, but they were definitely lower class, like almost subhuman to many of the British back then. Yeah,
and so what's interesting though is this Trevelyan guy, and the real version, he believed that since the Irish don't have potatoes to grow because of this blight, they just need to grow corn, and then they can survive. They'll have something to eat. They'll have something to sell. The problem is the Irish didn't know anything about corn. They didn't know how to prepare it. They didn't. Now it seems silly because in our modern knowledge, and we can just Google something, or we sort of have like this sort of wide slice of knowledge that applies to several different things. So I can sort of figure out how to grow corn, not knowing it beforehand. This is a different world. This is the 1840s,
right?
And the Irish didn't know anything about corn, how to prepare it, how to grow it, and it was more expensive than potatoes.
Right.
So they couldn't afford it. Didn't know how to make
it. There's less like actual edible piece of corn, like if you think about a cob of corn versus a potato. But also there's what I read that there was this was a pretty big attempt on Britain's part to stop the famine, was to replace corn, and they bring it in from America, and there's lots of reports of scurvy because there's no vitamin C in corn, while potatoes did, and so they tried to replace corn wholesale, and it just doesn't have the nutrient content that potatoes did.
Yeah, and they couldn't afford it anyway, and that was the whole.
And they hated it too.
Yeah, and that's probably half the reason for the potato famine, was because the Irish were already poor, and now they couldn't grow potatoes to sell, to make money, to pay their rent or feed themselves. And so now Britain's going, hey, here's this more expensive food you can buy, which is actually worse for you. Right. And so that's what's so ironic about that line is, this guy is stealing corn from the guy that said the Irish should eat corn, kind of a let them eat corn situation. And so because of that, the dad, who, Michael, who's stealing the corn from this Sir Charles Trevelyan guy, he's now going on a prison ship. And one other thing, go ahead.
Okay, so a little history on like the whole being in prison thing was something interesting I saw was. A lot of men, maybe not. It maybe doesn't fit this story exactly because he's married and has kids. But a lot of people would steal food. It was very common back then, and a lot of them would actually try and get caught just so they can go to prison and get a meal once a day or something like that, or even like this song later on in the song, get sent to a penal colony like Australia or something where there isn't the famine, where you can have actual food. Like it's better to be in prison and have food than starving in your own house type thing.
Right. And what's also interesting about this is a prison ship lies waiting in the bay. A prison ship is a certain type of ship. It's basically one to carry prisoners, obviously, based on the name. But I was always under the impression that prison ships were like this old thing of the past, where they chain these guys up down in the bowels of the ship. There's no light down there, very little air. It's like stuffy,
more of like a cattle barge than
which is what it was. I mean, the British had prison ships during the Revolutionary War, and that's where they kept American prisoners in Brooklyn, off the coast of Brooklyn. Actually, they had like 8,000 American soldiers kept in a
really
the HMS Jersey is what it was called. It was quite literally a prison ship, and most of their bones after the war were actually buried in this, or they were actually the British sunk the ship after the war, and all the bones washed up on shore, so they gathered them and put in this massive urn, and it's you can actually go to Brooklyn Naval Yard in Brooklyn, New York, and it's there right now. It's literally called the Prison Ship Martyrs Monument. Wow. And it's all these Revolutionary War soldiers that died in the prison ship. But the point is you think of prison ships as something from that era, right? But when I was reading about this, I didn't know this, but during the Troubles in Ireland, which is in the 70s, they had a prison ship then off the coast of Dublin. And they would capture these IRA guys or these Irish Republican guys and put them in a straight up prison ship off the coast like it's 1750. Wow. Wow. And that was in the 70s. Like my dad was alive. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. That's. So. I mean, if you're thinking of like deterring escape and all that stuff, like that's not a bad place to keep your prisoners if you can like if it works. I don't know. That's crazy.
I guess it's supposed to deter escape. Yeah. Now the prison ship like from the 70s in Ireland, they weren't shipping them to Botany Bay or whatever, but they just kind of it was more like a floating jail. But in this case, it was shipping them off. But we'll keep moving though. So. Do you want to keep going, Scott, or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. So I was only talking about the first verse. Then it has the chorus, low lie the fields of Athenry, and it talks about how they were once in love, watching birds fly, and we had dreams and songs to sing. It goes on to sort of clarify why this Michael guy is in prison. So it's verse 2. It's now the man Michael talking back to his wife over the prison wall. Her name's Mary, we find out. He's Michael. And he says, nothing matters, Mary, when you're free against the famine and the crown. So it's this idea of, well, we're fighting kind of like a two-front war here. We're not only fighting just to stay alive with this famine, we're also fighting the bloody British kind of idea.
Because that kind of gets into that they weren't necessarily like strictly like a monoculture, just single crop nation. That they did grow lots of stuff like dairy. Like they've always been known for their dairy and cows and stuff. But yeah, that was shipped off to the crown, like England essentially. And so they're fighting the famine, and then they're watching. What a lot of historians say is that they were they were starving in riches. Like they had all this, they had a ton of well, not a ton, but they had other food to eat, but it was all being shipped off to England. And so that's another thing that they were fighting against with the crown. But they had no choice.
Well, and part of this was this farm system they had in Ireland. All the land was owned by oftentimes wealthy elites, usually Brits, and they allow the local Irish, to farm the land, farm potatoes on the land, and then sell the potatoes to pay their rent. But the rent they were paying, even before the famine, they basically could only make ends meet. They could only make their rent by selling the potatoes they grew. And so in order to feed themselves, they would have to oftentimes take a second job or something on the side, or the wife would have to do some other work. And that's how they bought their food, was from that, because selling the potatoes basically just kept them out of debtor's prison, kept them out of jail for not paying their rent to the British.
Right. And now they have no potatoes. And that was a big thing was the, what's the stupid word? They got kicked out of their houses, basically. Like they fell short on their rent, and they would get kicked out of their houses. The Brits would like destroy the house so they couldn't come back. It was pretty bad.
I think they actually show that in the movie Far and Away, since I was talking about it earlier. Because I don't know if I think it's the same era, because that's the one where Tom Cruise is like an Irish guy, like a poor Irish guy, and his dad dies, and like the British come, or some wealthy Irish guy who's in the pocket of the British, like comes and burns their house down. And so he has to like leave to America and join the great land rush in Oklahoma with Nicole Kidman.
Yep. I remember that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the word I was looking for is evicted. They were evicted out of their land, and they either died or went to America or got sent to a penal colony or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It sucks.
Yeah. But I mean, that's most of what we just talked about is like the history of the song, because over and over again, it's the chorus, like low lie the fields of Athenry, where once we watched the small free birds fly. Our love was on the wing. We had dreams and songs to sing. It's so lonely round the fields of Athenry. Right. Just repeated. But the last thing I was going to touch on is in verse 3, the very last verse. It now says that Mary, this wife, is now by a lonely harbor wall. So now she's moved from the prison wall to the harbor wall. She's watching the last star falling. And as the last star is falling, the prison ship that has her husband is sailing out against the sky. And you also find out earlier in the song that she has a baby, and that she's now going to have to raise this baby with dignity on her own because the husband's gone.
Right.
So, but what the line I was going to talk about is, says, sure, she'll wait and hope and pray for her love. And they say Botany Bay is how they say it in the song, but it's Botany Bay, like a botanist. And I didn't know where that was until a few years ago when I looked it up. Botany Bay is a real bay that still exists. It's in Australia. Yeah. It's actually right. I think it's like south part of Sydney now. But Botany Bay is sort of a catch-all term that's used by, the Brits, the Irish, Europeans, to sort of signify a penal colony, a British penal colony. Because Botany Bay was the very first penal colony that the British ever used in Australia. And they just called it Botany Bay because that's where they landed, was this bay in Australia that they called Botany Bay. And I guess after like a few months of being there, they realized this Botany Bay place was terrible. There was like no fresh water. The soil was poor, and there was really just nothing to do there. So they moved it to a different spot that wasn't even in Botany Bay, but they still kept using that term Botany Bay to signify a penal colony in Australia. And so that's the whole thing, is this guy is basically stealing corn from this British official to feed his kids for one day. He gets captured and shipped off to Botany Bay, Australia, to a penal colony, leaving his wife and kids at home and destitute and hungry.
Right.
And she's just basically going to do the Irish thing of, wearing her clotter ring and waiting for her husband to come home finally. Who knows when that'll be,
exactly.
from literally across the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very depressing. But yeah, if you get into much of history, that's usually what happens. A little bit I wanted to get into, actually, back to verse 2, when it says, against the famine and the crown, I rebelled, they cut me down. That there was a lot of rebellions. Like there was kind of a rise in like Irish nationalism during this time, because like they basically they wanted to fight the British. Like they wanted to get the British out. Like it was mostly failed attempts at this type of stuff, but it did have they were able to, the British were able to like squelch a lot of the rebellions at the time, but it had long-reaching effects into the future. And you can read about Irish history as far as that goes on your own. But yeah. But it also there was and a little bit more into that. There was in 1879 there was another blight that hit potatoes, and so it kind of started up again. But they were a little more prepared this time, and were able to fight the British, like this landlord tenant stuff that started happening again. But they were able to rebel against it and sometimes physically stop from being kicked out of their land and stuff like that. So they had organized a bit because of this, and were able to protect themselves in the future.
Yeah. And one thing I actually forgot to say, talking about this Sir Charles Edward Trevelyan guy, it's funny because not only did he have this like just huge anti-Irish sentiment, but supposedly he is one of the guys blamed for the potato famine. One reason being is he is partially the cause for the British government's slow response to the potato famine.
Right.
And the reason why he had the reason why I call it a slow response is because, like you said, potato famines have happened before. It actually happened in Scotland, like just a few years before this. Not nearly as bad because the government responded, offered help, whatever. But the Irish, being hated by the British, the British kind of said, well, he's actually quoted as saying, like I said before, the judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson, like as they're starving to death.
Right.
But what I think is so funny is the guy kind of had like proto-libertarian ideals, and that's actually the reason why
what do they call it, laissez-faire?
He delayed help was because he had such a strong belief. This is his own admission. He had such a strong belief in laissez-faire economics and the free hand of the market.
Yeah.
So it's just libertarians get bent. I mean, this dude.
Yeah, it's amazing that
I feel like we're starving. They can't eat. No. The market will correct itself, man. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
And it's one of those things where you read that, because I read that and it was like, oh my goodness, this fight has been going on for this long. Like, oh my goodness. Like you think our problems and our ideas are all new? Man, nothing is new under the sun. Like they've been fighting this thing.
A million people starving to death, and the guy's like, "Nah, the free market will fix it, man. Just give it a little bit. Give it some time. Have them eat some corn."
Exactly.
Which is more expensive.
Let them eat corn. Exactly.
Yeah. I know. I love it.
That is hilarious.
I feel like that's got to be so stereotypically British and libertarian at the same time. But yeah.
So I wanted to get a little bit into a few nerdy numbers, but it kind of has to do with like how this affected the British population, which I found really interesting. So before this,
you mean the Irish population?
Yeah, sorry, Irish population. Before this, the average marriage, the age of marriage for British women was 21, and I keep saying British, and then Irish men is 25. After this, it shot up to, for women was 29, and for men was 33, and then a third of men didn't get married, and a fourth of of women never got married after this, just because of economic problems and low wages and stuff like that. And so if you think about how that would affect not only losing, just like in a matter of like 5 years, losing 1 million people to immigration, and then also that much to death or more. You think about how that would affect your whole nation, and then late age of marriage, like you're not having as many babies. Like this really affected Ireland for a long time.
They call it a genocide.
Did they?
They referred, yeah. This is referred to in some circles as a genocide against the Irish, because if you look at how much it changed the demographics of Ireland, you're exactly right. I mean, how long did it take for Ireland to recover? They may never have recovered from this.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, and talk about like a chip on the shoulder. It all started with like, I mean, I can't say it definitively, but man, this because obviously there had been feuds between Britain and Ireland before this, because the nature of how Britain dealt with it. But man, this really put a chip on the shoulder for the Irish. And there were some, like you said, some specific British dudes that were pretty evil in their approach to how to deal with this.
Yeah, it's that atypical, just the elite being out of touch, right?
Yeah,
and
totally.
You know, partially it's like, oh no, this is God's judgment because they're Catholic or because they're Irish or whatever, and then oh, okay, we'll send them some help, we'll send them some corn, which they can't afford and don't know how to eat.
Yeah, they're thinking like if they can survive on potatoes, like sure they can survive on corn as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So one thing that I was also going to mention is like, what are your thoughts on why Dropkick Murphys did this song? It's a cover. They didn't write it, and they didn't release this song until 2003.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I think a little bit of what my thoughts on this is like if you listen to this song, it's a little different from the rest of the songs that they do. It's not like it's a little slower pace. I think they're trying to give it a little more
it's like a ballad.
Like a ballad, and they're trying to pay their respects basically to this. And I think you can tell that maybe it affected them personally. Well, obviously they're Irish from Boston, so they're probably descendants from people that came from Ireland at this time. And so it feels like a tribute, and they wanted to make it special, and so it's more of a ballad, less of like a punk rock, just like slamming through a song like they do in a lot of their songs. And so yeah, I think it is to pay respect.
And for those listening to like the different versions of this song, the Dropkick Murphys one is definitely the most like upbeat, but from the ones I've listened to, it also has the most bagpipes, which I think is kind of ironic, because the original one I think just has like an acoustic guitar, and then there's another cover by I think the Dubliners or somebody else where they sort of have like a bagpipe kind of playing in the background a little bit. But the Dropkick Murphys version, their piper is a guy named Spicy McHaggis. He actually plays the tune, like the actual tune of the song on the bagpipe, as opposed to sort of background music. And there's actually a slight background solo that turns into a duet between the electric guitar and the bagpipe. That's just awesome, kind of towards like the end of the song. So it definitely does get the blood pumping, even if you're not Irish. But
oh yeah.
But it's they're the Dropkick Murphys, for those that don't know, are punk rock, but kind of with a Celtic flavor. They are from Massachusetts, and this is not actually the first cover they've done. They've done several covers of like Irish songs and traditional Irish songs. We may get to them a little bit later, but yeah, anything else you wanted to say on this one?
No, just that like I love this. Now that we're getting into like the Dropkick Murphys style of music, I love the style of music. I feel like it speaks to me, and so I've had a ton of fun with this episode and listening to the song. So thanks for sharing it, and I hope our audience has just as much fun. Another thing I wanted to say, this is kind of beside the point, is another big point of the podcast in general. This kind of meta thing is that we want this to be like a jumping off point for you as an audience member to like kind of get interested in the Irish potato famine. Go study it yourself. Go look at how this might have affected your own family, your own city that you're in, how it shaped the world, and then as minute as like your own town. Go
and let us know what you find.
Totally. Oh yeah.
That'd be
We
awesome.
we can totally do like addendum episodes where we come back and revisit things. Like we're totally this is like pretty, I would say, laissez-faire podcasting, where we can have anybody we want on. We're no rules. So anyway,
Yeah. Hey, can I share 2 fun facts about the writer of this song?
sure.
Peter Mooney, aka Pete St. John. So, number one, the guy was born in 1932. He literally just died in March of this year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was 90 years old. So the guy that wrote this song died just a few months ago.
Well, this is a tribute to him.
Yeah. So Pete St. John, good on you, man. One other thing that was interesting is, so this guy is like we said earlier, he's kind of this Irish folk singer guy who I guess didn't sing a lot of songs himself, but he wrote a bunch of songs that other people did. One of his other more well-known songs is called "The Rare Old Times," which Dropkick, or not Dropkick Murphys, Flogging Molly covered.
Oh,
so
nice.
we might get to that later.
Oh.
But one of his other songs was covered by another punk band that does even more Celtic punk than Dropkick Murphys.
Oh yeah, they're this guy might be fueling a couple episodes of the History and Music podcast.
Yeah,
awesome.
for sure, for sure.
Another little tidbit is most people of our faith, the LDS faith, will know what was happening in 1847 in Utah, which is so to give you a little bit of a reference on time frames and stuff. Brigham Young walking into the Salt Lake Valley in 1847. So yeah, give you a little reference there.
Yeah, and the worst year the potato famine was 1847. They actually call it Black 47.
Yeah, they did.
That more people died that year than any other time during the famine.
Yep, and then just on the other side of the world, almost we were settling the fair state of Utah, which is awesome. My ancestors were so.
Mine too. Also because the government was putting the boot on us.
Yep, yeah, we run from the government. That's a common thing. All right, well, I think we're winding down a little bit. That was awesome. Like I said, I had a blast with this episode. At first, when you suggested it, I assumed it was something Irish. The Dropkick Murphys, Athenry sounds Irish, but this was really fun.
And
it's one of those. It's one of those subjects where I feel like everyone knows about it vaguely, but I don't. But like details and stuff are so fun to get into. So yeah, I suggest anyone that does think they know a lot about it, go learn some more. There's some cool details in there and some like funny, sad stuff. Go look into it.
Yeah. And I forgot what I was going to say. So
that's fine.
But so the reason I sort of picked this song is because I remember learning that, this song isn't even that old. This song was written in like 1970. This song was written 6 years before I was born. It's not not old at all. It's not from the era. There are references in it that are legit from the era. And that's part of the reason why I like bringing up this song is because, one, it'll appeal to our millennial audience for sure, but also because it mentions some very specific things there that if you didn't look it up, you wouldn't know. Like the Trevelyan with the corn line,
right?
Genius line for what he's trying to convey here.
Mm-hmm.
But I always just thought like, they're poor and starving, stealing food. Okay, simple as, it's
exactly
Irish stuff. But I don't realize that it had that much color behind it.
Yeah,
for who this guy was and why they were stealing the corn, why it was corn and not something else,
Mm-hmm. And not just to rhyme or something,
right?
But that's kind of coming from our, I guess, limited view on history based on like location. Like I grew up in a Utah elementary, high school. I learned about this famine, but I'm sure like the Irish and probably many around Europe learned a lot more about it in their schools. And so if you are Irish or you're more familiar with it, be patient with us. We we might have made mistakes, but just let us know.
And a moment of silence for the potato famine.
All right. Well, cool. I guess we'll end it here. Again, another plug to hit us up. Look in the show notes. We want suggestions. We have a list of our own songs, but we will take you will take precedent if you hit us up. Believe me. So do it.
And stay tuned. We actually have a couple guests lined up for the coming weeks, so stick with us. And shout out to Scott's other podcast, the Cold Bow podcast. That's COLDBOW, Cold Bow, one word. So check them out. They have quite an extensive catalog where you guys discuss mostly movies, right?
Yeah, movies,
kind of a movie podcast.
Games.
Yeah, movies and video games and other cool stuff with just basically dudes being bros.
Yeah.
But yeah, so stick with us. Thanks for listening, guys.
All right, we'll see you.
By a lonely prison wall, I heard a young girl calling. Michael, they have taken you away, for you stole Trevelyan's corn, so the young might see the morn. Now a prison ship lies waiting in the bay. Prison wall, I heard a young man calling. Nothing matters, Mary, when you're free. Against the famine and the crown, I rebel, they can't make down. Now you must raise a child with dignity.
We don't really have like a call sign, or what is it, like the outro
Yeah,
thing,
because
but
Brett has like the this has been Brett Kane and Tom Nickelman out.
out. Yeah, we don't have
Yeah.
that.